Welcome to Disability Empowerment Now, Season 3. I'm your host, Keith Murphy Deaconcini. Today I'm talking to my very good friend, Cary Goldberg, who is a spoken artist musician in New York City who's worked with several startup companies. Cary, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Keith. It's been a long time since we've caught up, and I look forward to getting into it.
Yeah, so I was just thinking about how we met. We were in a electronic, no, sorry. Uh, we were in a classical music class together at American University. And the teacher introduced us to each other in front of the entire class, assuming we both have cerebral palsy and assuming that all people with cerebral palsy had the same relationship to our disability. And so that was very, very awkward, but it began a 17 plus year friendship. You are one of my dearest friends, and I've performed with you in the past. How first of all, is my memory serving me correctly in how you remember how we met?
I remember that it was in Sapievsky's music theory class. I don't remember exactly the terms, but I do think that he introduced us um, together at some point, and then that was a wild cast of characters in that class. Um, a lot of which that I've kept in, kept in touch with all these years. Chris
Wow.
Moreno, Ethan Smith. So yeah, I've kept in touch with a lot of those folks, and yeah, I think that's how we met. And then I met your family, um, and when you've been in New York, we've caught up. So um, yeah, you've been a good
It's
friend for a long time.
Yeah, it's incredible that you remember the teacher's name. And you're right, it was a music theory class. I remember that I did a classical album for that class because that's the first and only time I've used the music notation program finale that dictates classical compositions. And the teacher found out that I had cerebral palsy. I must have said it to him, and he immediately pointed to you and said, "Oh, he had cerebral palsy too," which was one of the most bizarre ways to introduce and to meet one of your very good friends that way. I'm glad you've kept in touch with a lot of those people. I've kept in touch with none of them save you. Uh, of course, I think you were a full-time student there at the time, and I needed to fulfill a gap year and a musical itch. So how did you get involved with spoken word?
So I started out as a stand-up comic, doing punk and hardcore shows when I was young, when I was 15. It was supposed to be a one-night deal. And I've been now, this is my 20-year anniversary as an artist. Sorry, I'm a little hoarse today. But yeah, I started in 2003, and it's now 2023. But what happened was, um, I was doing stand up, and then I realized quite quickly, I mean, after a number of years, actually, this is interesting for the podcast for your listeners. Um, I was watching a rerun of South Park late at night, and I saw the character Timmy, and I never really watched the show. And I realized that people were equating me as somebody with CP to Timmy. And that led to my shifting of what I was doing. I did music for a very short period of time with a friend of mine from American, actually, and we produced a record in my dorm room, and then I was giving that record to people to try to get some ears on it, and one of the people I gave it to was a paraplegic musician named Vic Chestnut, who we became good friends. And every time he was on the road, I'd come see him and say hello. And we had a very complicated friendship because he was suffering from chronic pain, as we all do on some level. But he was really suffering. Um, and he ended up taking his life in 2009. And one day I said, I'm just going to book a gig and I'm just going to talk. I'm just going to talk. I'm gonna talk about my friend. I'm going to talk about my life. I'm going to talk about where I'm at. And that led to the last 12 years of doing spoken word. I mean, the pandemic changed a lot, but prior to that, I was pretty active, and I'm retiring this year to begin the family planning stage with my wife and focus on that. And 20 years as an artist is a long time, so I think I've given enough, and I think one of the most um, cherished aspects of my career has been playing with musicians and opening for bands that end up going a lot further, playing festivals, becoming rock stars, etc. And that is something that I really cherished, living vicariously through that and helping them through that at times. And so that I would my goal is to kind of work behind the scenes, moving forward, to try to get artists uh, to be recognized and to get, on the right labels, the right pathways to get them to be successful. Because, um, you know, when you've been a part of that journey, and I was lucky enough, when I started out, the local band was My Chemical Romance. And, when you are around that and you see that ascension, and I mean, even in a very small scale, if you're part of that journey, it's really something. So, um, coming up in that Jersey scene, and then later getting into the jazz world and rock world, and kind of um, being a part of multiple rides on some level has been really rewarding.
So I saw one of your posts on social media that you have actually run into a singer of a rock band that I've been listening to for years, besides My Chemical Romance. Uh, Art Alexander, the lead singer of Everclear. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know him on a personal level. We met after a gig one night, and I actually wrote a piece about him because it was a very interesting kind of interaction. But yeah, um, so much for the Afterglow was the first record I bought
Yeah,
as a kid, and that was on a cassette tape, and I wore that cassette tape out, and so that band, on some level, will um, always have a space for me. They also played American when I was there. Um,
wow.
I don't know if you were there for that, but they played,
No,
and I got to tell Art, it's this is my first record, so it was nice. He's a complicated guy, but he's a good guy.
yeah. So, congratulations on just getting married. You mentioned that you are retiring. How was coming to that decision of retiring after being a musician in several aspects, several different ways for 20 years?
Yeah, I wouldn't call myself a musician, more a performing artist. Um, I've dabbled in music, but mostly I leave the music to the professionals, and I stay in my lane. But
Of
um,
course.
you know, uh, we came to the decision mutually because you know um, I don't think there's anything more important in life than raising a family, and I can't be going out doing one nighters and you know in St. Louis or wherever, um, and leave my kids at home with my wife. Um, you know, and we talked about, like, even if everything happened for me and I was making, a living as an artist, would it work? And my wife said, I don't want to be a single parent. on any level. So I said, okay, give me one more show, and I'm gonna do that this year, and then we're gonna hopefully, knock on wood, have some kids, and you know, live the family life, as it were. I think you're muted.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
How did you meet your wife? Of course, I know. I've heard that story. It's very interesting and fun. So, would you mind telling it?
Yeah, so we met on an app called Coffee Meets Bagel, which basically the premise is that you have at least one mutual connection um, on social media, and and her icebreaker question was that she's seen uh, Bruce Springsteen 18 times or something like that. And I was like, all right, I don't really love Bruce, but I'm from Jersey and like I can get down with that. So um, we we spoke for 2 months before meeting um, because of her schedule.
Wait, did
So
I hear that correctly? You just said that you spoke for 2 months before actually meeting.
yeah, she was working um, night shift as an RN at that time, and she was just very busy, and work never lended itself to dating really. But we spoke on the phone for 8 hours a day. I mean, so once she came to my door, uh, I knew a lot about her, put it that way. And
I would
on
hope so if you were
yeah,
speaking 8 hours a day or somewhat.
yeah, and it worked out because at that time in my life, um, I was hanging out in the jazz world and staying up late. She was working night shift, so um, I'd be able to text her and make sure she was okay, and um, kind of be there for her. And she would drive into the city, come to me, and then we'd sleep and wake up, in the middle of the day and do it all over again. Um,
How
but
long have
we've been together 7 years, and we just celebrated our first wedding anniversary. And I there's nobody I'd rather be in a foxhole with than my wife. She's incredible.
that
So
that's very true and admirable. So you're retiring for the most one of, if not the most noble reason a man can retire from the spoken word life. How, over your 20-year career, how many albums would you say you've put out?
well, I did two comedy records, which nobody will find. Um, and then I did one music record that nobody will find. And then 6 spoken word records, something like that, which you can find all on social media, or not social media, streaming media,
Yeah,
Spotify, Apple Music, that whole
Bandcamp.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bandcamp. So that is the route. But I mean, all told, maybe 12 records and various media. Uh, I know you're pretty prolific. I think you've done more than 12, but
Yeah. I moonlight as a electronic artist under the name Ole Tippett. And I've been doing that for almost 20 years. I've been active since 2005. And I've easily put out um, over 40 records, EPs, and I'm holding a lot of stuff back because I can't really keep up with my own music and my day job. Uh, but yeah, and I don't really talk about that. I've also put out a few solo records, a few band records, and as I mentioned at the top, how we met, a classical composition album at American. And so it's been an interesting journey for me musically. If we had met earlier and you had made the prophecy or whatever that I would be in electronica even for a few albums, much less almost 20 years later, I would have laughed and said, "Who are you?" I think you've got the wrong guy here, because that's just not something I ever envisioned. I mean, that's not really my music style. That's not what I grew up listening to, except when I remembered that I grew up listening to the video game soundtracks of Sonic the Hedgehog. And so I've really, without my conscious knowledge, been bathing in electronica music, and I got into Star Set. Lindsey Sterling is a electronic violinist who I deeply respect. So I've dabbled in it listening wise a lot sooner, and also a lot later consciously than I've been making music. But yeah, so it's interesting the turns and twists that life will throw at you creatively.
on the topic of video game music, um, I know a few jazz musicians that have that are really passionate about video game music, and they've made jazz compositions of Sonic and Mario and Kirby and all those games, um, and they were actually um, there was an orchestra that was nominated for a Grammy this year. I think they're called the 8-Bit Orchestra, um, and a lot of my friends were in that band, and um, I just want to give a special shout out to a great saxophone player who actually moved to Japan to focus more on the video game music um, arena. His name is Patrick Bartley. He's one of my good buds, and if you're ever if you ever see him on a gig or see if you have folks in Japan that want to go to a jazz club, if you ever see uh, Patrick's name on a marquee, get ready because he's a beast.
Yeah, video game music and video games in general and computer games are also in that category. Over the last 10 plus years, they've expanded extremely in the level of storytelling, the level of visuals, certainly, but also the music is incredible. How I can turn on and listen to a soundtrack. Um, and it doesn't matter if I've played the game or not, or know the game in question. The music is just incredible. And they don't need to have any words, although a lot of them do, vocals. But yeah, video games and computer games are very much their own art form, and they just keep getting better and better and better. So anyone who tries to attribute them as mindless entertainment, it's really missing out and really doesn't know what they're talking about. And we've seen that expand uh, in the last decade or so. Moving away from that, as I mentioned, how we met. At the top of the interview, you also have cerebral palsy, and you've also been a spoken word artist, a performer. I've seen you at a few shows. How had your disability related or impacted your art, your performance style, and the like?
Um, on some level, it has impacted it in every way, and on some level, it has impacted it in no way. Um, of course, my work tends to be quite personal, um, but I never wrote about my disability because I thought it was a crutch. It was um, an easy thing to write about. And then, um, long before my wife, I was dating a woman, and it was New Year's Day, and her parents called and she put them on speaker, and they said, and I had met them the week before or something like that, and they said, don't date that guy. He's handicapped, Jewish, and he'll probably hurt you if you don't date him or something like that. And yeah, that was the end of that. Um, but that inspired me to write a little bit about my disability. And so, I have a few pieces that relate to that community. And um, there's some great, great poets. Living Ramon is a great um, poet with cerebral palsy. And, I really want to pass the torch to the next generation of great writers on some level. But yeah, I mean, I write about my disability, but more so about my life. And on some level, as you know, with CP, everything is affected by CP, and on some level, we're all just living in the world together as humans.
Yeah, you mentioned Lev Marone. She's a very young poet, but she's wiser beyond her years, particularly in her writing style. And so, thank you for mentioning her. So, going back to the start of your career, you first started, if I remember correctly, as a comedian. You put out some comedy albums that you'd say no one will find. I'm sure you have your reasons for that. How was it transitioning from being a comic to a spoken word audience and a performer?
I remember, now that you have jogged my memory, you were at one of my recordings that we did at American. Um, it was for a record called "In Time They Will Speak of This." I think on some level, sorry, as a as a comedian, I always wanted to further the conversation about who I was, who I am, and really impact people on a deeper level than just, getting a laugh. And it didn't work as a comedian because, um, I would play comedy clubs and people would say, people came to drink, not to think. Um, promoters. So that's why sorry, I I gravitated more towards concerts and opening for bands because um, at shows people are there to think. People are there to have their minds changed. They are there for social causes and for to connect with other people. You know, if you're in a mosh pit, for example, you're connecting on a physical level, on a visceral level to the music. But like if you listen to my set, a lot of times I make people cry because my stuff resonates with them on a deep level. And that to me is what my job is, right? To make my work palatable enough and strong enough that it resonates. And so I think ultimately it was a natural progression. And you know, I have I have a print of my friend Vic over there on that wall, and I look at it every day, and you know, thank him because none of this would happen without him. Um, and I've had some wild experiences that I think are in part because of him. And you know, I'm just I'm really grateful that my career, although I did not achieve the kind of commercial success that one wants, um, I've I've had some incredible interactions. I've been able to experience a lot of different things, and you know, I'm an old man now, but I'm really grateful for the time that I had. Um, you know, I think you know, I think we gotta talk about it, man. The pandemic in New York, it was crazy experience. I had just announced that a follow up to my jazz record with 21 musicians all over the world. We did this jazz record called A Prayer for Rhythm, and I had announced that A Prayer for Reckoning was going to come out that fall. And a week later, COVID shut down my city and shut down the world, and changed my whole worldview. Um, and you know, I spent 18 months inside. um, and you know, it's been getting back to life is a little bit more difficult. Um, and you know, and the reckoning that I'm hoping for was more of a political reckoning, which oddly enough, I think. Sorry about that. A second. My dog wanted to be part of the podcast for a moment. Um, yeah, I was really hoping for a political reckoning, and looks like as of yesterday, we might be getting that reckoning finally. But I think COVID on a lot of levels was a reckoning, a different kind of reckoning than I was anticipating that anybody was anticipating. But um, you know, being in the epicenter of that, um, I think my wife and I would probably be married anyway, but we decided to get married, and the pandemic had a lot to do with that. Um, because we were living in a studio apartment, and I was inside, and she was doing the grocery shopping and getting the mail, and you know, um, keeping me safe and walking the dog and all that. And you know, I would have absolutely died if I had stayed in the office I was working in. Um, a week after the shutdown, the guy behind me was on a ventilator. He almost died. The guy who was uh, 2 rows down from me, his father passed away. Um, and the coworker that sat across from me, she got COVID pretty badly in the first wave. So I was very, very lucky. And I mean, right before COVID, I was playing the World Series of Poker in Atlantic City, and there were a number of Asian players that were wearing masks and gloves. And I thought, well, what a brilliant strategy play that is to scare people, but it wasn't a strategy play at all. But like, as a poker player, you're not expecting, um, everything to be on the up and up so much. But I didn't, I didn't catch it until last July, and at that time I was triple vaccinated, and I still got very sick. But man, I am really grateful to have made it through. You know, it's a part of our history, and it's a part of our collective trauma, um, that I think we're going to be living with for a long time. And I think people have to talk about it on some level, and we don't want to. We want to act like it's not here anymore. We want to act like it disappeared. We want to act like, you know, um, it never happened. But like, if you were living here in New York City and they had makeshift morgues on the street, and, you know, you were waiting every morning for the Cuomo press conference so he could tell you, how many people died the day before. Um, it's something that I'll never forget, something that bonded my wife and I to a level that, I've never been bonded to anybody before, on that level. And for the people who were here, it was really something. And I was worried about you, because you, as I remember it, COVID broke out. You went from New York to Arizona with your family, and then COVID followed you to Arizona. And
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
I I had to make a very ungrateful exit from New York right after I got over COVID the first time. Uh, and then I got it again last year, although we knew last year what it was. The first time, no one knew what it was outside of the medical community. But yeah, it was very jarring. The pandemic actually put New York to sleep, quote unquote, for the first time in forever. New York City is famously known as the city that never sleeps, but the pandemic at its height knocked it out. So the city
well,
did actually sleep.
I don't know if I'd agree with that. I think it was eerie and different and strange, but there was a beauty to it if you could find it. Um,
You tell
if you
me more about that beauty.
if you could find the courage to leave the house, we were lucky enough to have a car, and lucky enough that we got a disabled parking pass so we could park all over the city. and we would go on car rides to just to pick up food, from uptown to downtown, and like all the way down the FDR Drive. And I mean, you've been on the FDR Drive. It doesn't take 10 minutes to go uptown to downtown, and it was taking 7 minutes to drive through the city. There was nobody. There was nothing. Everything was it. The city became the suburbs um, for a little while, and I think the every night at 7 o'clock ritual of you know thanking healthcare workers um, by clapping hands and clanging pots together and all that. I mean, it was a really wonderful thing, and and then eventually people came back, and everybody came back from the Hamptons or wherever they were, and now New York is back to normal on some level, but um, I tend to wear a mask still because when I was wearing a mask, I never got sick, right? And it was a wonderful thing because with cerebral palsy, I don't know if you're the same way, but I tend to get sick quite a bit with respiratory stuff or, colds or whatever, as you may hear in my voice. But I wasn't getting sick for years. That was also because I was inside for years. But there was a strange, you look at the skyline and there's nobody there. You look at the office buildings and they're empty. You know, um, there was a strange beauty that I don't know if I'm doing justice to, because like you say, a city that never sleeps, but it was hibernating. It was
Yeah,
hibernating that
yeah,
eventually it would come back and there would be a new normal, but I don't know how new the normal is anymore. But um, there were highs and lows, um, and the lows were low. But when you could find that beauty of looking out and realizing that you were alive, you were alive in the most expensive city in the world. You were alive, and that was more than a lot of people could say at the time. Um,
indeed.
and we were lucky enough to get a deal on a 1 bedroom during the first wave, so we moved in our building, and so yeah, there were highs and lows, but I think it's something that we should definitely talk about, and being that the president that was in control during that time is now finally an indicted individual. I think we're going to learn a lot more about the federal response to that, and then the insurrection that happened during that and everything else. It's going to be a really interesting next year, I think. Um, and I don't want to alienate any of your listeners, but I do want to say that the Trump administration was certainly um, they had folks like us in the crosshairs. They were cutting food stamps. They were cutting work programs. They were making it harder for folks like us to get jobs and folks like us to get government assistance. And it wasn't only certain minority groups, it was also the disabled. And I think people didn't realize that. People don't understand that. People don't understand that um, that we were in the crosshairs too. So I just wanted to say that, put that out publicly because I think it's important. Can I take like 2 minutes and come back? And mind pausing and
Yeah.
coming back? All right, I'll be right back. All right, thanks for that. Sorry, I think you're muted again.
No problem. Needed a break myself. So, getting back to your art and your retiring that year, what are some pieces of your art that really stand out to you as you're looking back on your career? And you mentioned that you didn't achieve the commercial success that you wanted to, but is what are some things that you did achieve that you are most proud of, and what are some things you wish you had achieved? Three-part question, but all related to your art.
Yeah, for sure. I think piece wise, I think it all started really with a piece called Next Stop New Delhi, which is the title of my second record. Um, and it was written in a very dark time in my life. Uh, I had been, um, I had been, uh, um, I had been forced to leave my third university, and I was staying in a motel, um, and I was probably at one of my lowest lows. And I wrote that piece, um, and it's the piece that people gravitate to the most as the capstone. And then for me, doing a prayer for rhythm in 2016 changed my life. changed my life was the best work I've ever done. I'm so proud of what we did. And I say we because it really was a team effort. My um, my engineer, Taylor Roy, who has done a number of my records. Um, I love him like family, and and um, and yeah, uh, I I guess I wish that I was able to achieve my own fan base so that I would be able to self-sustain um, some kind of um, you know living, even if it was a side living, some living, doing art. Um, I wish that I was able to put out more records. Um, I wish that I had met my wife earlier because she handles my spoken word Instagram thing. I don't do Instagram, but my wife's a wizard at social media. But I'm not. I think that's something that you need. Um, but I think again, when you play with a band in a basement and you say to that band, they're gonna come for you, like the record labels, the management company, they're gonna come for you. Like be ready when that comes. And then seeing that come, right? And seeing that happen, you know, from the basement to, my friends Hop Along from Philadelphia, they played Central Park this year. A sold out gig in Central Park. I'm like, that's fucking crazy. But like I hope I can curse. I hope I can curse here. But you know, it's crazy. And to have seen it before before it happened. Um, I mean that I can't think of anything um just I mean what a feeling, like good people. If it's not me, and it's not gonna be me, you know, I want to get a documentary done. I've been trying for a number of years, but it's not gonna be me. I mean that was the main thing too, getting a documentary done. That was something I really wanted, um, to get my story out there the right way. But if it's not gonna be me, it's gonna be good people. It's gonna be the hop alongs and the pine groves and the you know and I'm so I have so much gratitude for everyone that I've come across
So,
over the years.
what are 3 to 5 action steps that you can give the next generation of performers, be them spoken word artists like yourself, poets like Liv Maroon, um, comics, musicians? What would be the knowledge that you would like to impart to them?
Very importantly, have a well-rounded life. When I started, shows were all I did. Shows were all I went to. All my friends in my life were around shows and performing. And that's not a well-rounded life. So you can be an artist and do your art and perform and have that and love that and give yourself to that. But you can also have a life and go to prom and, you know, sustain and create relationships that you care about that have nothing to do with art. My wife didn't meet me through art. She didn't come to one of my shows, until much later, when we were already together. So, um, you know, I think that's really important. I think understanding what it is that you do and understanding that you're going to fail, you're going to bomb. Not every gig is going to be fucking great. Uh, there are going to be some rough nights, uh, but try to take solace in um, in the fact that you know what you're doing. And if I knew then what I know now, we'd probably be having this conversation on a much bigger platform. I'd probably be sitting in a penthouse somewhere on an island or something. But you know, I guess I'm in the island of Manhattan. But you know, I've learned a lot over the years, and I think the most important would be that, and then also, lastly, is know the value of your story, right? So many people over the years have said, Cary, we're going to make you a star. Kid, we're going to make you a star. And it didn't work out, right? But I gave so much credence to wanting to be a star, wanting to be something that I wasn't. You know, somebody asked me some years ago before COVID, he said, write me a piece about as if you were a disabled Superman. And I said, no. I said, I'm not going to write a piece that you want me to write so you can hawk me as the disabled artist all over the country. Like, I'm happy to be the disabled artist if the money's right. Add a zero to the check. I'll come for your disability pride week at your college and I'll put on a great set, great show. But like, I didn't want to be that. I wanted to be Cary, And I think when I was young and my friends became rock stars and um, I wanted that for myself, but I didn't have the understanding of who I was. And I just thought my time would come. I guess the last piece of advice would be don't wait by the phone for 20 years for the call, because if that doesn't come, you have to reckon with that, right? And that's a grief and a level on some level a disappointment that I'm now reckoning with. And I wouldn't, if I had a more well-rounded life, if I had a better understanding earlier of what my lane was and what I wanted to do, um, maybe I wouldn't feel the way that I feel now. So, proceed with caution. Uh, I wouldn't suggest starting out so young, but you know, it was what it was. It is what it is.
So, last question, my friend. This has been a very informative episode, and I'm glad you were so forthright and brutally honest about your life and your opinions. I would like to think that both disabled advocates and those who have yet to discover and embrace their own disabilities listen to this podcast. As my guests, what do you hope that disability advocates take away from this episode? And what do you hope that people who have yet to discover their own disabilities take away from this episode?
One of the most important lines that I ever wrote is we're all sick with the human condition. It's really hard to be a good human, right? On any level. And as disabled people, sorry, this is going to be a really long winded answer, but as disabled people, the world is not built for us. It just isn't, right? And I was hoping that in my lifetime, folks like you and I would get a seat at the table. I think certain aspects of culture and certain projects and media have done a bit of service to us, but um, I think we can do a lot more. And um, despite the fact that the world is not built for us, we have to tell our story because so many of us are unable to tell that story because we can't do it in conventional ways, be it nonverbal, whatever the case may be. But if you're listening to this and you're inspired in any way, tell your story, like loudly, um, and whatever that means to you, because um, I think society on a lot of levels is built upon the tenet that um, that people need to help people with disabilities in order to get a step up on Jacob's ladder. You know, um, they have some biblical need or desire to um, to do that, and that's all well and good. That's great, but like I would love it if when I was out on the street and my wife was with me wearing our wedding rings, if people didn't think she was my nurse, you know, if people had an understanding that we're in this just like anybody else, and we are persecuted just like anybody else. But the way that we're persecuted is that society does not believe that our community can advocate for ourselves, can empower ourselves. And there's something to be said for minority groups that are persecuted out of some kind of societal fear, some kind of xenophobia, or whatever the case may be. But there's also something to be said for a group that is persecuted because society doesn't believe that they are worthy enough to attain a certain stature within society. And that cannot be further from the truth. So I'm not, raise your voice, tell your story. Forgive yourself, right? Because being disabled is hard and it's a lot on anybody, right? So be kind to yourself and understand, there are resources, there are great resources, there are great communities on social media that will validate your struggle. And if any of your listeners are out there and need somebody to talk to, I'm always here for anybody. Reach out to me. I am not hard to find. And we'll get through it, and hopefully, at the end of it all, the community is better off, more empowered, and has that seat at the table. That is my hope. So I hope that answers the question.
Yes, it does. Thank you, my friend Cary Goldberg. You can find his spoken word albums on Spotify, Bandcamp, and the like streaming services. Cary, you have a big year ahead of you as you retire from the spoken word performer and advance into the next great chapter in your life. I look forward to seeing you again soon, my friend, in person. Say hi to your wife for me. And thank you again for coming on my podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and love to you and your family. And I'll catch you when you're in New York soon.
Take care, my friend.
All right, you too. Take care.